Russian scientists stated in 1970 concerning the moon, saying that it's an artificial space object. The moon, often described as having divine feminine energy, the female counterpart to the sun. It's a source of cosmic phenomena, providing us with beautiful eclipses, changing tides, and hopefully a future staging point for missions to Mars and beyond. But when we start to look at the moon under a closer lens, a number of aberrant characteristics suggest that it might be hollow and that there may be a secret moon base. The hypothesis that the moon is hollow inside is far from new. In his 1901 novel entitled The First Men in the Moon, H.G. Wells, who lived between 1866 and 1946, known to many as the father of science fiction, wrote about an epic journey to the moon. The protagonists of the novel are surprised to learn that the moon is not at all what it seems to be from Earth. In fact, it's hollow and inhabited by a strange alien race. Such fantasies were very bold for the novel published in 1901. But as soon as people visited the moon more than 60 years ago, the concept of a hollow moon was further developed. And why did that happen? During the lunar landings, the astronauts deployed several seismographs on the lunar surface. These tools are designed to record movements and vibrations. Seismographs remained on the lunar surface to collect activity data on the moon. The instruments that were installed during the Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, and 16 missions transmitted information to the Earth via a radio channel until they were simply turned off because of financial savings in 1977. According to Gaia, quote, the astronauts were given a series of ALSEPs, or Apollo Lunar Surface Experiment packages, to set up seismographs and initiate detonations ranging from shotgun-like charges to mortars with multiple grenades. Eventually, NASA intentionally crash-landed the Apollo 12 module as well as the SIVB rocket, setting off an explosive force equivalent to nearly 12 tons of TNT, end quote. These data spoke a lot about the moon and its internal structure. In particular, they reported the existence of moonquakes. These events were divided into 4 categories. 1, deep moonquakes, that's 700 kilometers below the surface. 2, vibrations caused by meteorite impacts. 3, thermal moonshakes. 4, small moonshakes, 20 to 30 kilometers below the surface. At last, small moonquakes led to the hypothesis of the hollow moon, and it's said that during these events the moon rang like a bell, quote unquote. This phrase was often used after the Apollo 12 flight, and during its implementation, the 2.5-ton takeoff stage was deliberately dropped on the lunar surface. The duration and severity of the seismic disturbance caused by the shock surprised the seismologists. They heard strong signals lasting for more than an hour and a half after the impact, the weaker signals that were recorded within an hour after the collision. It's not surprising that using such information, some people came to the appropriate conclusion: the moon, in their opinion, may not be as solid as official science claims. Some highly respected scientists of the last century have stated that the moon is an alien spaceship, and it's known as a theory of Vasin-Sherbakov. In an article by Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov published in 1970, it was suggested that the moon is actually an artificial hollow satellite of the Earth, placed in near-Earth orbit by extraterrestrials. Vasin and Sherbakov were the members of the USSR Academy of Sciences. However, the article was published not in a scientific journal, but in the Sputnik publication, and it was a kind of Soviet literary digest. In their article, the scientists did not mention who or what placed the artificial satellite into the orbit of the Earth, basically described the materials of which the moon consists. They had to withstand both extreme heat and cold and be durable to bear the impacts of meteorites. And besides, they raised numerous questions about the formation of the moon, which was difficult for other scientists to ask. And by doing so, they faced a lot of criticism, of course. Uniti Karutalaki of Cornell University suggests that there are at least two ways to determine the distribution of mass within a body. One involves a moment of inertia parameters, and the other involves seismic observations. In the case of the former, Karutalaki points out that one such parameter, the normalized polar moments of inertia, which is very close to that for a solid object with a radially constant density, 0.4 for comparison to Earth, value is 0.33. As for the latter, he notes that the Moon is the only planetary body besides Earth on which extensive seismic observations have been made. These observations have constrained the thickness of the Moon's crust, mantle, and core, suggesting it could not be hollow. Karen Masters of the University of Portsmouth similarly suggests that, based on the behavior of objects interacting with the gravitational field of the Moon, we can determine its mass. Given the observable size of the Moon, we can then calculate the density, which strongly rejects the notion that the Moon could be hollow. Sherbakov and Vasin proposed that massive machines were used to melt rock and form long cavities within the Moon, spreading the molten refuse onto the lunar surface. And they said that the Moon was preserved by a hull-like interior shell, in addition to a reconstructed outer shell of metallic rocky junk, and eventually this enormous craft was steered through the cosmos and finally put into orbit around our planet. The two scientists backed their claim with scientific data. They stated that some lunar rocks contained processed metals such as brass, the elements of uranium-236 and neptunium-237. Interestingly, these cannot be found to occur naturally. According to Zulu and other native African accounts, the Moon was built far away to keep an eye on people and as a vehicle to travel the universe. And it says that the reptilians' giant mothership is the Moon, and that's where they escaped during the cataclysm of the Great Flood, which they had caused by manipulating the Moon and creating other cosmic events. This is according to Zulu African legends. The legend tells of Wowani and Banku, who brought the Moon to Earth after stealing it from a great fire dragon. They're said to have emptied out the egg-like satellite of its yolk, subsequently placing it in orbit around the Earth. Prior to this, the planet was said to have been shrouded in a sheath of watery mist, which came raining down to Earth once the Moon came into orbit. Former NASA scientist Robin Brett, who was among the first people to study and direct research on the Moon rock, said, "It seems easier to explain the non-existence of the Moon than its existence. And besides, according to scientists, the Moon is older than the Earth by nearly 800,000 years, which raises a lot of questions." And this is on Collective Spark by Vicky Vermahausen-Wise. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.